CBS News legal analysts Rikki Klieman and Jack Ford both covered the O.J. Simpson trial. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what did this change in terms of coverage of trials?
I think what happened is this made popular trial coverage part of the culture. You know, I've often said, a number of people said, this kind of became the first reality show, you know, where everybody was plugged in. You know, it had all the elements of great drama. You had O.J. Simpson, who was a superstar, allegedly fallen from grace. You had violence, you had sex, you had celebrity, and you had mystery. I mean, to this day, there are a lot of people who don't really know what happened. So I think it really launched the notion of, in some ways, reality shows. And it also launched the notion of crime and what happens inside of the courtroom as a form of entertainment. Right.
Were most people surprised by the verdict?
I'd say that people were shocked by the verdict. We, of course, can all remember back to the newspaper coverage where we would see those photographs, and it looked like it was split by racial lines, that you had African-American people cheering and you had Caucasian people looking like they were crying. But the truth is, I think for us, for those of us who had covered that trial day in and day out, that when that jury had come back in 4 hours, then they impounded the verdict until the following morning. There was no doubt that that verdict was going to come in not guilty.
But isn't that what upset people, though? Isn't that what upset people? That after 9 months of listening to evidence, that you come back with 4 hours. I remember thinking, how could anybody have taken it seriously if you come back in 4 hours?
I remember saying that in a lot of these cases, it takes a jury 3 hours to decide what to order for lunch.
Right, let alone who's going to be the foreperson.
9 months of trial and dozens of witnesses. And I think, and Rikki and I have talked about this, I think that's what was most shocking. A lot of people were watching and said, you could understand a not guilty verdict. You might disagree with it. You can understand guilty, but it's so quickly.
Go ahead.
I want to say 20 years later, O.J. Simpson is in jail for something else.
Yes.
Many people believe that he was guilty. Why did he get off?
Well, I think that the case was mismanaged from the police and the prosecution from the very beginning. You have to remember the history in Los Angeles about how the police felt about the minority community and how the minority community felt about the police. So it was not inconceivable at all that there may have been a planted glove. It was not inconceivable that they were framing O.J. Simpson. To the rest of the world, it may have seemed impossible. The other thing was, with this dream team of defense lawyers, the key evidence, the blood evidence, the DNA, it was absolutely massacred by the brilliance of Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who understood. And of course, you can never negate the charisma of both O.J. Simpson when he walked in that courtroom and Johnny Cochran when he put on that hat and said, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
You must acquit. How big of a role did race and celebrity play in this thing? People go back and forth about that.
Race kind of came into the case a little bit late. You know, and in some ways, I remember talking to Johnny Cochran about this. It was accidental. You know, the fact that Mark Fuhrman is such a significant figure and that he happened to have conversations years before with an aspiring screenwriter, and she kept it. That came in a little bit late. I think that celebrity was the overarching.
Where he used the N-word.
Exactly. So it allowed him to attack now a critical witness. But I think celebrity was always the overarching concern.
Before we leave, what has O.J. Simpson said since then in the intervening years about what happened and what he did and did not do? And is everybody waiting for him to confess? Somebody thinking, if in fact I can get this interview with him, finally he'll confess?
He'll never confess by saying, I did it. He could only write a book that said, if I did it.
If I did it.
Which led a lot of people.
Has he said anything, though?
He's never admitted it. He has always denied that he was involved.
And you knew O.J. Simpson?
I knew O.J. I knew O.J. for years before. We had met at a college football banquet. We were working together. I was at NBC News. He was at NBC Sports when it happened. And the reality is, I've said this, O.J. Simpson, because of his celebrity, was one of the few people in the justice system who truly got the benefit of doubt.
Without any doubt.
Where people absolutely adopted the notion of innocent until proven guilty because of the power of celebrity, who he was.
20 years later, people are still talking about it. Thank you, Rikki Klieman and Jack Ford.